My husband secretly put our house up for sale after my mom left me her business. He didn't know she'd changed one document before she died. The first sign that my husband had put our house up for sale was a woman standing in my driveway at 9 in the morning taking pictures of my hydrangeas. My mother had been dead for 6 days. There were sympathy cards covering half the dining room table, 3 casserole dishes in my refrigerator that didn't belong to me, and my mother's reading glasses were still sitting beside my purse because I'd accidentally brought them home from the hospital and couldn't bring myself to return them to her empty house. I opened the front door and stared at the woman. "Can I help you?" She lowered her camera and smiled. "You must be Natalie. I'm Rachel from Carson Realty." I had never heard her name before. "Why are you photographing my house?" Her smile slowly disappeared. She glanced at the camera, then back at me. "For the listing." For a second I genuinely wondered whether grief had affected my hearing. "What listing?" Rachel shifted her weight. "Daniel said you were both preparing to sell." Daniel was my husband. We had been married for 24 years. Apparently, that still wasn't long enough for him to mention that our home was about to become a real estate listing. I asked Rachel to wait outside and walked into the kitchen. Daniel was sitting at the island with his laptop open and a mug of coffee beside him. He looked up. "Who was at the door?" I watched his face carefully. "The realtor." His hand stopped halfway to his coffee. That tiny movement told me everything before he said a word. "You know her?" I asked. Daniel closed his laptop. "Natalie, let me explain." I didn't sit down. "Why is a realtor photographing our house?" He rubbed his jaw. "It's preliminary." I nearly laughed. My mother had died Saturday. We buried her Wednesday. It was Friday morning, and apparently my husband had already reached the preliminary real estate photography stage of grieving. "Preliminary for what?" I asked. Daniel stood. "I asked her to prepare a coming soon listing." I stared at him. "You listed our house?" He immediately corrected me. "It's not technically active." I pointed toward the driveway. "There's a stranger photographing our home because you told her we're selling it. Don't hide behind technically." Daniel exhaled. "We're going to have some major decisions to make." "About what?" "Your mother's company, the house, our finances, the next few years." My stomach tightened. 3 days before the funeral, Mom's attorney had explained the basic outline of her estate. Her house, investments, personal property, and the company she had built over 32 years, Price Signworks, would eventually pass to me. Price Signworks wasn't some little neighborhood print shop anymore. Mom had started with 1 vinyl cutter and 2 employees. By the time she died, the company occupied a 40,000 square foot building outside Columbus, employed 36 people, and handled everything from hospital signage to vehicle wraps and commercial installations. I knew it was valuable. I had no idea exactly how valuable, and I hadn't been interested in finding out while choosing flowers for my mother's funeral. "What does Mom's company have to do with our house?" I asked. Daniel answered immediately. "We have roughly $300,000 in equity here." That was the first number that truly frightened me. Not because it was wrong, but because he had already calculated it. "If you keep Price Signworks," he continued, "you're going to need capital and flexibility." "I haven't decided I'm keeping it. It's yours." "That isn't the same thing as knowing what I want to do with it." Daniel gave me the patient expression he normally used when explaining insurance deductibles. "Natalie, opportunities like this don't come twice." My mother had been dead 6 days and my husband had just called what she'd left behind an opportunity. "My mother's death is not an opportunity." His expression changed. "That's not what I meant." "Then stop planning around it like she just handed us a winning lottery ticket." Daniel looked hurt. That made everything harder. He wasn't a cruel husband. He had driven Mom to chemotherapy appointments when I couldn't get away from work. He repaired her porch railing, changed the batteries in her smoke detectors, and called her nearly every Sunday after football. My mother liked him. Sometimes I thought she liked arguing with him more than she liked agreeing with me. People want betrayal stories to come with obvious villains. Real life usually doesn't cooperate. "Tell Rachel to leave," I said. Daniel sighed. "We haven't even discussed selling." "Exactly." I walked back outside myself. Rachel was standing near her car, pretending to review photos. "I'm sorry," I told her. "There's been a misunderstanding. The house isn't for sale." She looked genuinely horrified. I understood both owners were aware. "Did I sign anything?" I asked. "No. Daniel signed preliminary paperwork yesterday, but both titled owners would need to sign before anything proceeded." I nodded. Nothing illegal, no forged signature, just confidence. Before Rachel left, she hesitated. For what it's worth, he asked us to move quickly. He thought you might want to go live by Monday. Monday, 9 days after Mom died. When I returned inside, Daniel was still waiting. Why Monday? He frowned. What? Rachel said you wanted the house moving by Monday. Daniel looked away. I said possibly. Why are you in such a hurry? He folded his arms. Because there's interest. In our house? He didn't answer quickly enough. Interest in what, Daniel? He rubbed his forehead. I've been looking at options for PriceSignWorks. I felt my heartbeat change. Since when? For a while. How long? Another pause. A few months. My mother had been sick for 8 months. What kind of options? I asked. Valuation, expansion, potential buyers, management. I stared at him. Potential buyers? He immediately defended himself. Companies like Price get approached all the time. Did Mom know you were looking? Daniel hesitated. Your mother and I talked about the business. That wasn't my question. Finally he said, she knew I was interested in what might happen after her. He stopped himself before saying death. That somehow made it worse. My mother's attorney, Mary Ann Chen, called that afternoon. She had handled Mom's business matters for almost 18 years. Can you come in Monday? She asked. There are corporate documents we need to review. Automatically I said, Daniel can come with me. Mary Ann went quiet. Actually, Natalie, I think our first meeting should be with you alone. I closed my office door. Why? Because you're the beneficiary and incoming owner. I knew lawyer language when I heard it. That's not the whole reason. Another pause. No. What did Daniel do? I asked. I'd rather explain in person. That is not a sentence anybody wants from an attorney. I didn't tell Daniel about the call. That was unusual for me. We had shared almost everything for 24 years. Bank accounts, passwords, medical appointments, embarrassing family stories, every financial decision that mattered. But something in me wanted to hear Mary Ann's version before Daniel had a chance to explain it away. Our daughter Sophie came over Saturday. She was 23 and had inherited Daniel's ability to walk into a room and instantly sense tension. She looked from me to her father. What happened? Daniel said, nothing. Sophie looked at me instead. Mom? Your father tried to list the house. Sophie froze halfway through taking off her jacket. What? Daniel sighed. It was preliminary. Sophie stared at him. You put Grandma's house, your house, up for sale. I started preparing options. I laughed. He really likes that word. Sophie sat at the counter. Why do we need to sell it? Daniel explained the same thing he'd explained to me. Home equity, business capital, flexibility. Then he said something that stayed with me. Your mother doesn't want to run a manufacturing company. I looked at him. You keep saying that as if I signed something. You've said it yourself for years. I said I didn't want to work for my mother. Exactly. That's not the same thing. Daniel leaned back. Natalie, you work at Grant Medical. You haven't been involved with Price in decades. I worked there 7 years. Part-time. I handled payroll for 25 years ago. His point wasn't completely wrong. That was what made it dangerous. So what exactly do I want? I asked him. Daniel looked irritated. You don't want the stress. What do I want? I repeated. He opened his mouth, then stopped. For all the planning he'd already done, my actual answer wasn't anywhere in his head. Monday morning, I sat across from Mary Ann with a legal pad in front of me. Marla Benson, Mom's general manager, was there too. Marla had worked at PriceSignWorks for 27 years. When she hugged me and called me Nat, I almost cried because Mom and Marla were the only people who still used that nickname. Mary Ann started with the company numbers. PriceSignWorks had generated a little over $7 million in revenue the previous year. An outside valuation conducted 6 months earlier estimated the company between $4.4 million and $5.1 million depending on assumptions. It had equipment leases, a mortgage on the building, normal operating obligations, and healthy cash flow. The numbers barely registered. To me, Price was still the place where Mom drank terrible coffee from a mug that said, I'm not bossy, I have better ideas. You'll inherit 100% of the ownership interests, Mary Ann said. Marla can continue day-to-day operations while you decide what level of involvement you want. I looked at Marla. Please keep doing exactly what you're doing. She smiled. That was already my plan. Then Mary Ann opened another folder. 3 weeks before your mother died, she amended the operating agreement. She pushed 12 pages toward me. I read until the legal language stopped meaning anything. What did she change? For 24 months after her death, certain extraordinary transactions require approval from a continuity committee. What transactions? Selling more than 20% of the business, transferring control, pledging your ownership interests as collateral, a major merger, or extraordinary borrowing. I stared at her. Mom put people between me and my own company? Temporarily. I'm 48 years old. Marianne gave a small smile. Your mother pointed that out when we drafted it. Then why did she do it? Marla answered. Because Daniel contacted Harrison Group. I knew Harrison. They owned several regional manufacturing and service companies, and had recently bought a printing company near Dayton. What do you mean contacted? Marla folded her hands. He approached someone there about Price Sign Works. My chest tightened. When? 4 months ago. Mom had been undergoing chemotherapy. What did he tell them? Marianne handed me an email. Daniel had written to a man named Peter Sloan. He said Price Sign Works might face a succession event within the year, and that there could be an opportunity for Harrison to acquire a controlling interest while retaining local leadership. I read the phrase succession event twice. My dying mother had apparently become a corporate event in my husband's inbox. Did Mom know about this? I asked. Eventually, Marianne said. Harrison contacted her directly before proceeding. I could picture my mother reading that email, putting on her glasses, and saying something quiet and lethal. What did she do? She told them the company was not for sale. Did she confront Daniel? Marianne nodded. Yes. I stared at her. He never told me. Your mother asked him not to involve you. Why would she do that? Marla answered softly. Because you were already spending half your week at the hospital. Evelyn knew what would happen if she told you. Unfortunately, so did I. I would have gone home, confronted Daniel, listened to him explain that he was only exploring possibilities, gone back to Mom, listened to her complain that Daniel was overstepping, and spent the next month trying to keep 2 people I loved from hating each other while one of them was dying. Mom had protected me from the argument. I wasn't sure whether to thank her or be angry. Was that why she changed the agreement? I asked. Marianne hesitated. Not entirely. That answer was worse. She reached for a thicker packet and placed it in front of me. The cover read, Price Sign Works Strategic Transition Proposal. Prepared by Daniel Bell. I stared at my husband's name. I opened the packet. The first pages described Price Sign Works, its revenue, customers, and growth opportunities. Page 3 contained a number I recognized immediately. Our house, estimated available equity, $318,000. I looked up. Why is my house in this? Neither woman answered. I kept reading. Daniel proposed that Harrison Group purchase 65% of Price Sign Works. I would retain 35%. Harrison would provide expansion capital. A second location could be opened. Our home equity would become what Daniel called founder family reinvestment. Then I reached management. Proposed president, Daniel Bell. Estimated compensation, $190,000 plus performance incentives. My hands became cold. Daniel had spent 27 years selling construction products. He had never worked one day at my mother's company, yet in the future he'd designed, he was president. I turned another page. There was a timeline. One line read, residential property sale, target completion within 60 to 90 days of succession. Suddenly Rachel standing in my driveway made perfect sense. Daniel wasn't improvising after Mom's death. He was following his plan. When did he write this? I whispered. The date was in the corner. 3 months before Mom died. She was still driving herself to the office then. Still complaining about property taxes. Still texting me reminders to rotate my tires. My husband had already created a timeline that began after her death. He sent this to Harrison. I asked yes. Marianne said. And they sent it to Mom? They told Evelyn they would not discuss ownership without authorization from the actual owner. Despite everything, I almost laughed. My husband had tried to negotiate a corporate acquisition with people, professional enough to call the person who owned the corporation. What did Mom do when she saw this? She rejected it. And Daniel? He went to see her. My stomach dropped. When? About 4 days before she amended the operating agreement. Mom had been weak by then. She used oxygen occasionally. I was spending most evenings at her house. Daniel had apparently gone during the afternoon when I was working. Marianne handed me one page of handwritten notes. Mom documented conversations like she expected every disagreement to end in court. According to the notes, Daniel told her Harrison could protect the company through the transition. He argued that I didn't have current manufacturing experience and would probably prefer a sale. He said Price needed experienced leadership. Experienced leadership apparently meant him. Then I read the sentence that changed the entire conflict. Daniel had told Mom, "Natalie will be relieved when somebody gives her a solution. She'll resist at first because she hates being rushed, but once she sees the numbers, she'll come around." I stopped reading. Come around. Daniel had used that phrase our entire marriage. When his sister wanted to borrow my SUV for 2 weeks. "Give Natalie a day, she'll come around." When he invited 12 relatives to Thanksgiving without asking, "She's irritated now, but she'll come around." When Sophie wanted an expensive summer program and I initially said no, "Your mom just needs time, she'll come around." And most of the time, I did. Sometimes because Daniel was right, sometimes because the issue didn't matter enough, sometimes because saying no for the 4th time was more exhausting than saying yes once. At the bottom of Mom's notes, she had written one sentence in capital letters. "Daniel thinks Natalie's first answer is a delay, not an answer." I stared at it until the words blurred. "That's why she changed the agreement," I said. Marianne nodded. She didn't think Daniel would steal the company. She didn't believe he was committing fraud. She didn't even believe he was waiting for her to die. She thought he had become so certain about what would happen afterward that your opinion had become something he expected to manage. I was angry at Daniel. Then, unexpectedly, I became angry at Mom. So she created a committee to protect me from my own husband? Not exactly. How is it not exactly that? Marianne turned the operating agreement toward me. Your mother didn't block you from owning, operating, receiving profits, hiring, firing, or making ordinary decisions. She only slowed extraordinary, irreversible decisions. Why? She wanted you to have time. That word stayed with me. Time. If 6 months from now you decide you genuinely want to sell, Marianne said, the committee can approve it. Your mother wasn't choosing the company over you. She was making sure nobody arrived immediately after her death with a plan already prepared for your signature. I looked at the strategic proposal again. That was exactly what Daniel had done. When I got home, he was cooking pasta, garlic was sizzling in a pan, music played softly from the kitchen speaker. For one ridiculous second, I wanted to pretend I didn't know anything. Eat dinner, talk about Sophie, complain about work, be married. Then Daniel looked up and asked, "How was your day?" "Did you send Harrison Group a transition proposal for my mother's company?" The wooden spoon stopped moving. There are moments when an answer reaches you before the words do. "Marianne showed you," he said. "Did you send it?" "Yes." "Why?" "I was exploring options. You included the sale of our house. It was a funding scenario. Rachel photographed that funding scenario Friday." Daniel turned off the burner. "I wasn't forcing you to do anything. You gave yourself a $190,000 president job in a company you don't own." His face hardened. "There it is. There what is? You think this was about me finding myself a job. Weren't you? I already have a job. A job you've complained about for 10 years. That's cheap. Is it wrong?" Daniel looked away. He had worked for Barrow Building Products for 27 years. He had trained people who later became vice presidents. Twice he had been passed over for senior leadership. Both times he came home insisting it didn't bother him. Both times, it obviously did. "I wanted to build something," he finally said, "using Mom's company. With your mother's company. That's not the same thing. We're married, Natalie." That sentence landed heavily. 24 years. Our accounts are shared. Our retirement planning is shared. Our home is shared. Now you inherit a company worth millions and suddenly I'm supposed to pretend it has nothing to do with our future? It affects our future. That doesn't make you the owner. I never said I was. You decided I'd keep 35%. Daniel answered too quickly. 35% of a larger growing company. I stared at him. He heard himself. "Do you understand what you just said?" "Natalie, you are explaining how much of my mother's company I would still own after your plan. That's not what I meant." "It is exactly what you meant." He walked away from the stove. "Fine, I'm sorry I moved too quickly." That apology wasn't enough, but I couldn't explain why yet. The next morning, I called Carson Realty and formally removed anything connected to our property. Daniel hadn't forged anything. He had simply represented that I would eventually agree. Again, that confidence bothered me more than anything illegal would have. That week, I started spending evenings at Price Signworks. Marla walked me through contracts, payroll, equipment, major accounts, and staffing. I didn't suddenly become a manufacturing genius. Half the terminology made my head hurt, but for the first time since college, I was learning what Mom had actually built. I discovered something else. I liked parts of it. I liked listening to department managers explain problems. I liked the fact that decisions produced physical results. A hospital needed clearer wayfinding signs, and 2 weeks later, our team installed them. A local company rebranded its fleet, and suddenly 30 vans carried something our people had made. Daniel had assumed I wanted nothing to do with Price because I once said I'd rather swallow nails than work for Mom. Maybe I hadn't wanted to work for Mom. That didn't mean I didn't want to understand her company. A week later, Peter Sloan from Harrison Group called me directly. He apologized for the circumstances and told me Harrison was not actively pursuing Price Signworks. Then he added, "I debated whether to call because Daniel contacted me yesterday." I closed my eyes. What did he want? He asked whether our interest would remain if you became open to discussing a transaction later. I thanked him and hung up. That evening I found Daniel opening sparkling water in the kitchen. I spoke to Peter Sloan. His hand stopped. "You called him again." "One phone call. I told you I wasn't selling. You told me you weren't discussing it now." I stared at him. He continued, "Those aren't necessarily the same thing." For the first time, I saw the entire problem clearly. "You think my no has an expiration date." "What?" "You think I haven't reached your answer yet." "Natalie, you're grieving." "Yes." "You're angry." "Yes." "And 6 months from now, you may feel differently." "I might. Then 6 months from now, I can call Harrison." "And what if the opportunity is gone? Then it's gone." Daniel shook his head. "You don't understand how business works." The room went silent. He immediately regretted it. "Actually, say it. I haven't worked in manufacturing for decades. I don't understand mergers. I don't understand industrial sales at your level." "All true." He looked relieved. Then I added, "And none of those things make you the owner." His face changed. I went upstairs. That night he slept in the guest room. A few days later, Sophie called. "Dad says you two are basically separated." "We're sleeping in different rooms." "That's basically separated." Then she asked the question I knew would eventually come. "Is this really worth ending a 24-year marriage?" "No," I said. She sounded relieved. Then I continued, "But I don't think the business is what might end it." "What is?" "I asked your dad to stop contacting Harrison. He contacted them again. Maybe he thinks he's helping. He probably does." That answer confused her. It confused me too. Daniel wasn't trying to hurt me. He genuinely believed he was protecting me from making a bad decision. The problem was that his version of helping had stopped requiring my permission. "Helping someone still means they get to say no," I told Sophie. She was quiet. "I don't want to choose sides." "I'm not asking you to." "Good. So don't," she sighed. "I hate this." "So do I." 2 weeks later, I returned. This time I brought Mom's handwritten note with me. "Daniel thinks Natalie's first answer is a delay, not an answer." "Did Mom think I was weak?" I asked. Marianne shook her head. "No." "Then why protect me?" "Because competent people can still get tired." I looked at her. Marianne continued, "Your mother said you spent most of your adult life taking care of everyone else's comfort before asking what you wanted." I almost laughed. "That sounds judgmental." "It was Evelyn. Fair." When I got home, Daniel was in the garage organizing shelves. I stood in the doorway. "She'll come around." He turned. "What? That's what you told Mom." His face changed. "Natalie, you said I'd resist, then I'd see the numbers and come around. Your mother wrote down everything." "Yes, apparently she did." He sat on the edge of the workbench. I asked the question I finally understood mattered. "Why were you so sure?" "Because usually you do." There it was. No lawyer interpretation, no corporate document. My husband said it himself. "Usually I do what?" "You think about things and eventually agree with you?" Daniel looked away. "Sometimes." "How often do you come around to my no?" He frowned. "That's not a fair question." "Why? Marriage is compromise." "Yes, exactly. Compromise means both people move. I move. When?" Daniel opened his mouth. Nothing came out. I thought about years of small things. His sister borrowing my car. Family gatherings hosted at our house without asking me. Money lent to his brother, vacations rearranged around his parents, none of them were enormous. That was why I had never kept score. 24 years of small decisions don't feel like a pattern, they feel like life. You never forced me, I said. No. You never threatened me. No. You never controlled my bank account. No. His voice sharpened. Then don't make me sound like some abusive monster. I'm not. That's what this is becoming. No, I'm saying something much less dramatic. Daniel looked at me. You got used to me giving in. He went completely still. And I got used to calling it compromise. Neither of us spoke. Finally, Daniel said, "What do you want me to do?" For years, that question would have pulled me straight into problem-solving mode. Explain his mistake. Design the solution. Tell him exactly what apology I needed. This time I said, "I don't know." He nodded slowly. Then, unbelievably, he asked, "Are you going to sell Price?" I laughed. He closed his eyes. Okay, I deserved that. For the first time since Mom died, something changed. Daniel emailed Peter Sloan the next day. He copied me. The message said that any future communication regarding Price Signworks should go directly to me or my authorized advisors. Then he formally withdrew anything connected to the house sale and stopped asking about the company. At first I assumed it was strategy. Days passed, then weeks. He still didn't ask. One Saturday, I heard him talking to Sophie in the living room. "So you're really not going to work at Grandma's company?" she asked. Daniel answered, "It's not my company." Sophie said something I couldn't hear. Daniel replied, "I know what I thought. Your mom gets to decide." I stood in the hallway longer than I should have. That sentence mattered. Not because Daniel had become perfect. Because it was the first time I heard him explain the situation without making me responsible for disappointing him. We started counseling. Daniel suggested it at our third session. Dr. Patel asked him why he had created the Harrison proposal without telling me. Daniel sat quietly for a long time. "Because I thought Natalie would be overwhelmed." Dr. Patel waited. Daniel finally added, "And because I wanted it." I looked at him. "I wanted the job," he said. "The president role?" she asked. "Yes." "Why?" Daniel laughed softly. "Because I'm 51 and apparently still 12. Nobody laughed with him. He looked down at his hands. "I've spent 27 years making other people look competent. I've trained executives who now make decisions over me. I've brought in major accounts, fixed other people's problems, and watched younger guys get promoted because somebody decided they looked more like leadership." I knew that bitterness. I just hadn't understood what he'd done with it. "Evelyn built something real," he continued. "She could point to a building and say she created it. Natalie could drive through town and point to things her mother made. I sell products for a company whose headquarters are 6 states away. When I leave, somebody takes my accounts and my name disappears." Dr. Patel asked, "So Price Signworks represented what?" Daniel looked embarrassed. "A chance to matter." For the first time, I understood him fully. He wasn't simply chasing money. He wanted identity, status, ownership, something that proved 27 years of work had led somewhere. "You wanted what Mom had," I said. Daniel looked at me. "Maybe. And you were going to use what she left me to get it." He closed his eyes. "Yes. No excuse, no explanation afterward. That yes hurt, but it also mattered." A few months later, Harrison Group approached me directly. This time they proposed buying only 30% of Price Signworks. Marla would remain general manager. I would keep control. They would provide capital for equipment and expansion. I agreed to hear them out. When I told Daniel, he simply said, "Okay." I waited. He looked confused. "What? You don't want to know the terms? Do you want to tell me?" That question almost made me laugh. 3 months earlier, he would have asked 14 questions before I removed my coat. 30%, I said. Marla stays, I keep control. He nodded. They'd finance additional equipment and a second installation team. Daniel thought for a moment. "What do you think?" I asked. He smiled slightly. "Are you asking because you actually want my opinion? Yes, or because you're testing me?" "Both. Fair." He considered the numbers. Then he said something that surprised me. "Don't take investment money just because someone offers it. Make sure the capital solves a problem you actually have." I stared at him. "What?" He shrugged. "Growth isn't always good." "You wrote a whole expansion proposal." "I've had an educational few months." I laughed. For a second, he was the Daniel I'd loved for 24 years. Funny, smart, self-aware. That made everything harder. Marla and I eventually hired an outside consultant. Their conclusion was much less exciting than Daniel's proposal. Price Signworks didn't need a second location. It needed 2 equipment upgrades, a better scheduling system, and a stronger sales pipeline outside its largest accounts. Most of the improvements could be funded internally. We didn't need Harrison. We didn't need to sell our house. I didn't need to give up control. Nobody needed to become president. Sometimes the dramatic solution is just what happens when somebody gets excited before properly understanding the problem. When I told Daniel, he nodded. I was wrong. I waited for the explanation. It never came. No but. No, I still think. Just wrong. That became one of the hardest parts of deciding what came next. If Daniel had stayed arrogant, leaving would have been easy. Instead, he was changing. 6 months after Mom died, I asked him to sit with me at the dining room table, the same table where sympathy cards had been stacked after her funeral. I placed 2 things between us: Mom's operating agreement amendment, the canceled house listing. Daniel looked at them, then at me. I've been thinking about why Mom changed that document, I said. He nodded. I think she was trying to give me time. From me? Not exactly. His expression tightened. She didn't think you'd rob me. She didn't think you were evil. She didn't even think you were waiting for her to die. Daniel looked down. She thought you'd already built the future in your head. He nodded. And she knew I had a habit of eventually stepping into whatever future made everybody else comfortable. Daniel swallowed. I know. You listed our house because you assumed I'd eventually agree. Yes. You contacted Harrison because you assumed I'd eventually agree. Yes. You gave yourself a job in my mother's company because you assumed I'd eventually agree. He closed his eyes. Yes. And when I said no, you treated it like the beginning of a negotiation. Another nod. I started crying. I'd promised myself I wouldn't. Daniel's eyes filled too. I don't know how to go back to not knowing that, I said. He stared at the table for a long time. Are you asking me to move out? Yes. For how long? I don't know. Are you divorcing me? I haven't decided. Daniel nodded. He didn't argue. He didn't remind me we'd been married 24 years. He didn't tell me he'd changed. That almost made it worse. I'm sorry, he said. I know. I wish I'd figured this out before your mother had to protect you from me. I shook my head. She didn't protect me from you. Daniel looked up. Then what did she do? She slowed everything down long enough for me to hear myself. Daniel moved into an apartment 12 minutes away. There was no screaming, no suitcase thrown outside, no neighbors secretly watching. He packed clothes, books, his coffee machine, and half the kitchen tools he insisted were technically his. After he left, I found the emergency cash he'd hidden for years inside an old golf shoe. I transferred the money to him with a note. Criminals check golf shoes now. He replied. Good to know. I cried after reading it. That was separation, missing somebody and still knowing they shouldn't be in your house. We continued counseling. Sophie struggled with it. One night she asked me, if Dad changed, why isn't that enough? I thought for a long time. Because change isn't a receipt, she frowned. What does that mean? You don't put one apology in and automatically get the marriage back. That's harsh. Maybe. Do you still love him? Yes, that surprised her. Then why not go home? I am home. She looked away. That answer hurt both of us. Daniel kept changing. Not perfectly. Sometimes he still gave advice before asking whether I wanted it. Once, Dr. Patel caught him interrupting me 3 times in 5 minutes and asked if he'd prefer answering questions for both of us. Even I laughed. Change wasn't cinematic. It was repetitive, awkward, sometimes embarrassing. Daniel eventually left Barrow and took a vice president of sales position with a smaller regional company. It wasn't president. It wasn't ownership. But they hired him because they wanted him to build a team, and I hadn't seen him that proud of his own work in years. Price Signworks changed too. I reduced my hours at Grant Medical and spent more time at the company. Marla agreed to stay while we developed stronger management underneath her. I never became my mother. One Evelyn Price had been enough for Ohio, but gradually employees stopped treating me like a visitor. I learned the business well enough to make decisions without pretending I knew everything. 1 year after Mom died, Marianne asked whether I wanted to request early removal of the continuity restrictions. I surprised myself. No. You want to keep them? Another year, why? Apparently my mother occasionally had a point. Marianne smiled. Never say that where Evelyn can hear you. She's dead. That never stopped her from being right retroactively. I laughed. Harrison approached once more. Their new offer was reasonable, 20%. No control rights, no management replacement. I reviewed it carefully, then declined. Not because Daniel had once wanted the deal, not because Harrison was bad, because Price Signworks didn't need the money. For the first time, saying no felt incredibly simple. Nobody argued, nobody tried again, nobody waited for me to come around. That was when I understood how peaceful a real no could feel. Daniel and I stayed separated for 14 months. We still saw each other, Christmas with Sophie, occasional dinner, counseling. He came to Price's summer employee picnic because Marla invited him. At one point she asked him to help move a folding table. Daniel saluted and said, "Finally, my executive opportunity." I laughed harder than I should have. That was the problem, there was still so much to love. Eventually Dr. Patel asked me a question I'd been avoiding. "If Daniel had never listed the house, do you think you'd still be married?" I thought for a long time. Yes. Daniel looked down. Then I added, "But the same problem would still be there." He looked at me. "What problem?" I didn't say it angrily. "You thought loving me meant knowing what was best for me." His eyes filled. "And I thought loving you meant eventually making things easy." Daniel nodded. "That's fair." Dr. Patel asked if the marriage could change. Daniel said yes. I said maybe. 2 months later I filed for divorce. Not because Daniel had failed to improve. His improvement was real. That was what made the decision painful. I filed because every time I imagined returning to the marriage, I could feel myself watching every decision. Was his suggestion really a suggestion? Was my answer being accepted? Was I agreeing because I wanted to? Or because peace felt easier? Maybe that feeling would have disappeared after 5 years. Maybe it wouldn't. I realized I didn't want to spend 5 years measuring it. Daniel didn't fight the divorce. There was no courtroom war, no hidden accounts, no dramatic judge. Real divorce was mostly forms, appointments, signatures, and 2 people trying not to turn 24 years into evidence against each other. The house remained mine as part of the settlement. Price Signworks remained mine under the estate structure. Daniel kept his retirement and other assets. Sophie was angry at both of us for several months. Then life became ordinary again. On the day we signed one of the final documents, Daniel asked if I wanted coffee. We sat near the window of a small cafe. He stirred black coffee that didn't need stirring. After a while he said, "I still can't believe I listed that house." "I can." He laughed. "Fair." Then he became serious. "I really thought you'd agree." "I know. That's the part that bothers me now." "Why?" "Because I wasn't scared you'd say no." I looked at him. "I thought no was just the part before you understood why I was right." There it was, cleaner than any lawyer or therapist had ever explained it. "I know." Daniel looked out the window. "I loved you. I know." "I still do. I know." He smiled sadly. "Very annoying answer." "You trained me well." We both laughed. Then he asked the question I hadn't expected. "Do you think Evelyn hated me at the end?" "No." "You sure? She was furious with you. That sounds more believable." "But she didn't hate you." Daniel looked relieved. "Mom said good people can make selfish decisions," I told him. He nodded slowly. "She was more generous than I deserved." "Not always." "No." We finished our coffee. In the parking lot, Daniel hugged me. 24 years of marriage fit into that hug in ways no divorce agreement could ever explain. Then we walked to separate cars. Price Signworks is still operating. Marla eventually reduced her schedule, though she refuses to call it retirement because she says retired people buy recreational vehicles and she has standards. I hired an operations director, not Daniel, not because he was incapable, because the company needed someone selected for the role, not someone who had already selected himself. Sophie works in marketing for a completely unrelated company and regularly reminds me she has no intention of inheriting a sign business. Mom would have found that hilarious. And here's the part that surprises people. I eventually sold the house. The same house Daniel had secretly tried to put on the market. I sold it about 18 months after our divorce. Not because I needed business capital. Not because Harrison required anything. Not because Daniel had been right. I sold it because the house had become too large for me, and I wanted something closer to Price. The difference was simple. I wanted to. I moved into a smaller home. I invested most of the equity. Bought furniture that actually fit the rooms. Daniel helped Sophie move my old sofa. Life didn't end. Nobody went bankrupt. Nobody lost the company. Nobody's future was destroyed because I refused to follow Daniel's plan. 2 years after Mom died, the continuity provision expired automatically. Marianne called. "You're officially free." I looked around Mom's old office, which had slowly become mine. "I think I was already free." There was silence. Then Marianne laughed. "That sounded unfortunately like your mother." "I take it back." Too late. I kept one page from the old operating agreement framed in my office, just Mom's signature, Evelyn Price, signed 21 days before she died. For a long time, I thought the biggest thing Mom left me was Price Signworks, a company worth millions, 32 years of her life, a building full of people who still occasionally called me Evelyn when they were frustrated. But the business wasn't her most important gift. Neither was her house. Neither was the money. It was that one document. Not because it stopped Daniel from stealing from me. He wasn't trying to steal. In some ways, that would have been easier. The document interrupted a pattern neither Daniel nor I had known how to name. He believed my first answer wasn't final whenever it wasn't the answer he wanted, and for years, I had taught him that he was probably right. I called it compromise, patience, being flexible, keeping the peace, being a good wife. Sometimes it was those things. Sometimes I simply got tired first. Mom couldn't decide whether Daniel and I belonged together. She couldn't decide whether I should sell the company or spend the rest of my life running it. She couldn't even know for certain what Daniel would do after she died. She had only seen enough to worry. So she made the biggest decisions move slowly. Daniel had already built an entire future before Mom died. Harrison bought most of Price Signworks. Daniel became president. Our home equity became investment capital. I kept a minority share. And eventually, as always, I came around. The only part of his plan he never accounted for was me having enough time to decide that I didn't want his future. Mom gave me that time. Then she left the choice to me. Love can survive disagreement. Marriage can survive mistakes. What it cannot survive forever is one person believing the other person's no simply means not yet. My mother changed one document before she died. Daniel thought it was designed to keep him away from her company. He was wrong. It gave me something much more valuable. Enough time to stop handing over my decisions before I'd even made them.